Welcome to the Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer.
And I am producer Bill.
You guys, I am pretty excited today. We have a fantastic episode with one of my favorite authors in the whole world.
Dude, no,
Ron,
I just want to acknowledge your bravery, Ron, because when Ron hit us up about having hit this author up, it was like he had stolen the pebble from the Kung Fu Master's hand, like he had moved the rock to free the Messiah, like he had grabbed the sword from the stone. He wrote an email to us saying that he had done this thing, and it was glowing when it hit my inbox. You braved talking to an author that's sort of seminal for you, and I'm glad that you did, Ron.
I got to be honest, I was a little bit concerned that this was going to play out like the Chris Farley show, where it would just be Ron being like, you remember when you wrote that thing? That was so cool.
That was so cool. Because you're not wrong. I mean, I touched on it in the episode a little bit, but that is like kind of what I do with authors for some reason. I cry or I say something like unbelievably dumb or just forget to ask a question that I've been wanting to ask for like 10 years or something along those lines. But I didn't do that this time. And I got to tell you, I'm very proud of myself.
You held it together, man. You held it together.
And I think part of it, though, guys, is that Kevin is such a great dude. Yeah. He didn't come off like somebody who's written 27 damn books. He didn't come off as someone who has done so much research into Celtic lore that he could drink you under the table and still recite all the shanties or whatever the hell from way back in the prehistoric times of those areas. He's just a guy who has mastered a mythology, mastered a way to put that into the urban fantasy milieu and machine, and just basically churn out so many stories that are so faithful to this conception that he has of these characters, and they seem to be real, and he seems to be talking to his old friends every time he writes a book. So to have him on the show flexing that sort of story craft was it's kind of intoxicating for story nerds like us.
Well, and the other thing that was interesting as somebody who is as talented and prolific and celebrated as he is, he came to this show with a fairly scalding opinion. I mean, this was not just a nice gleeful traipse through the meadow here. Like he had a demon to exercise on this show, and I think we did that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the first couple episodes we kind of talked about how this show isn't going to be like our old show. We're going to sometimes criticize a thing and dig into a thing and find its weaknesses, but to also talk about how it makes it great or the concept makes it great. And that's definitely what we did with this episode.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're going to find out the thing that makes it the greatest missed opportunity, the greatest shank of all time.
I mean, look, by this point, if you're watching this or listening to this, you've seen the title of the episode, so you know that we are talking about Darth Vader as the greatest, but not the greatest villain and not the greatest, redemption story. Oh no, Darth Vader as the greatest missed opportunity in all of pop culture.
An opportunity that you should not miss out on? Our Patreon.
Woo!
Yeah. I can do segues sometimes. Remember how I used to be bad at segues? Now I'm amazing at segues.
Listen, you got to just master the final step, which is not calling out how good you are at segues. And then you'll be perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I'll remember that for next time. You guys, check out our Patreon. It's very easy. Click on the little link below. Join a tier. Get extra pods, art, whatever you want to do with us and support us. And we appreciate that if you do it.
And speaking of supporting us, support us even after we wreck your dreams, along with Kevin talking about Darth Vader. I know you got your arrows. I know they're shooting up in the sky in a parabolic arc about to rain down upon us. But please, just hear us out, and you will understand why we and the great author Kevin Hearne agree that Darth Vader just might be a big old miss.
Our guest today is Kevin Hearne. He's an Arizona native, New York Times bestselling author, whiskey aficionado, creator of the Wolfhound Oberon and his human, Atticus O'Sullivan, of the Iron Druid Chronicles.
He's also written the Seven Kennings series and a bunch of other stuff we're going to let him plug at the end.
And one of the brilliant things he's written is a canon Star Wars novel called Heir to the Jedi, where he got the chance to answer some questions about Luke that maybe no one had ever thought to ask.
And we mentioned that today on The Greatest Pod because we are presenting one of the most unique premises that we have featured on this show. And that is Darth Vader the greatest missed opportunity in Star Wars history? Which we know some sparks are going to fly on this one.
Yeah, but first, let's get to know the author of such a bold statement. One of the kings of urban fantasy, the great, prolific Kevin Hearne. How you doing, brother?
Great. Thank you guys so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's kind of you.
Yeah, I am personally very excited. I'm in the middle of Plague of Giants. It's fantastic, by the way. And I was just curious, what got you into doing urban fantasy, though, when you first started?
It wasn't the first thing that I began with, honestly. It was a thing that I came to sort of by accident because it was going to be fun. I wanted to write epic fantasy, and then, of course, I eventually did. You're reading it now, Plague of Giants. But that's not what I actually began my career. I began with an urban fantasy because while I had an epic fantasy off on submission, I wanted to do something just to kind of entertain myself and keep busy while I was waiting to hear back. Yeah. Well, it took a long time to hear back, and so I wound up writing this whole novel, and having a great time doing it because I got to basically do a lot of research on pagan Irish mythology and things like that. So when I got finished with it, since the epic fantasy didn't seem to be going anywhere, I said, well, why don't I try this? And then that wound up being the thing that got published first. So yeah, I got lucky.
Evan, I wanted to ask, because I noticed that your Atticus O'Sullivan series in particular is very heavy on the Irish mythology. I mean, to the point of being almost esoteric. And I was wondering if that was something you were interested in before you started writing, or if that came with the series.
Kind of came with it, but it's partially my heritage. I'm sort of a UK mutt. And so, partially Irish, and then my family Sullivan on my father's side, and my paternal grandmother's side. So that's kind of where the O'Sullivan thing came in. And I wanted to get into Irish mythology because a lot of people were telling fairy stories. That there are fairy stories from all over the world, honestly, but the Irish were supposedly one of the originators. There are several, origin points for fairy stories, but Ireland was one of them. But the Irish, particularly Irish version of it, didn't seem to be getting into popular culture very much. And so I thought that was, a mine to explore and see what was down there, what I could dig up. And there's a lot of great stuff. Like the things that you often hear about are you hear about Breed and you might hear about the Morrigan, but you didn't really hear about the other deities of the Irish pantheon. And I thought this was a chance for them to come on out and show the world who they were. And the love god Angus Og is not a very loving person. And so that's one of the things that really kind of fascinated me about the mythology there is that it's slightly different from what you found on the continent or elsewhere around the world.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of love gods are just banging all the time. This Angus Og, not so much. Not so much.
No, yeah. I love that it's kind of emblematic of the fact that like love is passion, and they excuse crimes out of passion because they know how worked up it can get us as mere mortals. And then you see us mortals are a reflection of the gods and vice versa. So it's like it's a good way to show the power of love as it were.
And I love that. I don't know if it was specifically because it's not an explored area that you chose to do that, but like as you can see a little bit, I have read a lot of fantasy books, and I don't think I've read almost anything that had Irish, a little Celtic, I guess, arguably, but that's almost always related to Arthur. Almost every time it's related to Arthur. It's very rare that you get something that's outside of that realm. So definitely one of the things I was super pumped about when I was reading it was just how original it was. I also, one of the things I liked, and I was curious, how you decided to do this, and it's something I've never seen in urban first person. I guess it's first person writing. Is that what we call it, right?
Yeah.
When you made it 3 different characters from the 3 different views, that was the first time I've ever seen anybody do that. Was that the first time, or has it been done before and you were just...
Oh gosh. I always get nervous about questions like that, because if I say I was the first one, somebody will inevitably show up and say, "You are wrong, sir."
That's a good point. I get that. Let's...
but it was the first time I had done it.
Yeah.
I can say
fair
that.
enough.
Yeah, we don't want to get you attacked by Sophocles or somebody.
I was basically kind of trying things out with different voices and narrators. I've always been fascinated with that. And I tried that out in Hammered, where I kind of had a few chapters that were almost like a mini Canterbury Tales in the 3rd book of the Iron Druid Chronicles.
Yeah. And
I had so much fun doing that I wanted to do more later. And eventually I did get around to doing that in the last 3 books. And then that expanded, that desire to do different voices expanded when I finally did my epic fantasy, because you've got 11 different first-person points of view in A Plague of Giants.
Yeah.
And you have 12 in the sequel.
That's a very clever way to do it, to have someone telling the story. I also enjoy that too, by the way, having a storyteller within the story. That's just...
Now that was my attempt to look at basically the old Homeric epics. The history we're taught in school is that Homer had memorized the Iliad and the Odyssey. They were, each chapter or book was a night's entertainment around the hearth. And it had the heroic couplets and all of those stock phrases and things like that to help him, remember as he performed. So I thought, well, what an interesting kind of experience that would be, to have a bard tell you an epic night by night. And could I reproduce that somehow in prose form? That's what I was trying to do. So the structure of A Plague of Giants and, the 7 Kennings trilogy is my attempt to bring a Homeric experience into modern prose.
Well, you pulled it off. Just my opinion. Just one fanboy's opinion.
I have to ask, Kevin, obviously that you're somebody who's very invested in sort of old world storytelling traditions and old world mythology. Where for you does that dovetail with Star Wars? Because obviously Star Wars has fantasy elements to it, but it is, at this point, kind of prototypical science fiction. And it's a little bit different, certainly, than, Irish mythology or anything like that.
Well, a lot of people have pointed out some of the structure of the Star Wars films being related to heroic journey kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And I saw some of the same sorts of structure to the movies that you would see in some of the old epics and, of course, other novels. So I thought that was fun. And, of course, I was 7 years old when Star Wars first came out, and I saw it at the biggest theater in Arizona at the time, the Cine Capri. And, when I saw that Star Destroyer come out of the top of the screen going, pew, 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 I mean, I was immediately hooked, right? Had the Star Wars action figures as a little kid and all that stuff.
Maybe the better question then is, given that that's a formative experience, which I think it is for so many people, where does fantasy and sort of this interest in mythology come out of Star Wars then? Maybe it's a chicken and the egg thing.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, I don't know if that. I think it's more of just a concomitant or a concurrent kind of relationship where I like both things. The person who kind of got me doing both fantasy and sci-fi was Alan Dean Foster. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he wrote both genres in like 120 something novels at this point. An incredibly prolific career. And he wrote one of the very first Star Wars novels.
Yes.
So I kind of got into, not only the movie, but there's the books, and then, I enjoyed the fantasy as well. And so I think that kind of, I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to your question.
It is.
Well, no, I'd like to interject that it is, it's a pure childish in a great way thing to not divorce the two. When you're a kid, a ray gun guy, a sword guy that has a ray coming out of his sword, it's all the same. And we, as we grow older, we try to categorize everything. We try to put everything with little pull tabs and Post-it notes on it and genreify everything, classify everything. So it's all the same when you're a kid.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ed. When you're a kid, it's all magic,
Yeah.
The story is magic, and I think that 100% agree. That's awesome.
Yeah, I've these that one right there. That's all the Star Wars books. There's more in another shelf. But the Alan Dean Foster book is books. He has a couple, I believe, are fantastic. And I think Star Wars is a great mixture of fantasy and sci-fi. I think it's obvious, but it's my favorite thing is you do get the magic with the Force, and then you get the sci-fi with the sword that's literally a laser beam that cuts things in half. I mean, it's bananas. Plus,
and also to that effect, though, with Kevin, your book Heir to the Jedi. Right. You get to answer some questions in that. You get to, the first time I read something that was after one of the major movies in regards to continuity was Truce at Bakura. And I remember one of the early passages talking about Luke, like just being like, these goddamn electricity burns on my chest. My daddy's boss lit me up. Shit, this is awful. And he was just whole passages like that as he, proceeded on some adventure. And I think he met Mara Jade on there or something like that. And I
believe that is his exact accent, by the way.
but you get to do some of that sort of gallivanting after a major Star Wars event, filling in a gap. Can you talk to us about your particular book and why you wanted to do that? Because I think it's central in what we're going to talk about.
Well, they approached me to write Luke Skywalker because they liked what I was doing with the Iron Druid Chronicles. They saw Atticus O'Sullivan as a guy who was basically good, but boy, did he get in a lot of trouble and have to get himself out of it. And it was similar enough in terms of similar enough to Luke Skywalker that they thought I could, take a shot at writing him. So I actually got to write him in first person. I think I'm the only person who got to do that. And
I've never read a Star Wars novel that was in first person. So
yeah, there's one more called I, Jedi that I know of, and there might be more coming down the pike. But anyway, they asked me to basically explain, and this was a question that I had as a kid. Okay, when I was growing up as a kid, I can't believe that I got to answer the question that I had when I was a young fan, 12 years old. I'm sitting 12 years old watching The Empire Strikes Back, and I'm looking at Luke hanging upside down in the Wampa Cave, and then he summons, the lightsaber to his hand, telekinesis. I'm like, whoa. That was a big deal for me, more than almost anything else that happened in the movie, because I was like, where did he learn how to do that? Who taught him? And I kept waiting for the rest of the movie for them to explain, how did he get that power? It never got explained. So there was just a huge gap in his, obviously he picked it up somewhere, and I thought we were going to learn it, but he hadn't met Yoda yet. And so he hadn't met Yoda yet, and he still knew how to do that. And then we got later on, we got the prequel things, and we learned that all the other Jedi are dead. Well, then who taught him? Ben. And so then it was a thing where, okay, so they want me to tell the story of how he grew in the Force when all the Jedi are dead from Order 66, and he hasn't met Yoda yet. And you can't have Ben, like holographic Ben Kenobi come up and show him everything, and teach him that way. And he had just gotten done with his training in A New Hope, which was basically he lost to a training droid, right?
Yeah.
Right. And there's feel the Force, and he zapped it like a womp rat, So that was all he had in terms of Force training. And then suddenly he can do this amazing stuff. So that was incredibly appealing to me as a writer, that I got to tell the story that I had always wanted to know the answer to. Very long-winded explanation to your question.
No, that's exactly what I wanted because it's germane to all that we're going to talk about. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, as somebody who clearly thinks a lot about the minutia of Star Wars and how these things play out, I want you to give us your thesis as it relates to the title of the episode here. Why then is Darth Vader the greatest missed opportunity in Star Wars? What's your overriding idea?
Okay, so when we get to Return of the Jedi, gosh, I hope I'm not spoiling anything for anybody.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. When we get to the Return of the Jedi and we see that Darth Vader has been saved in the sense he says, "You saved me, Luke," right? And it's supposed to be a moment of redemption when he takes the Emperor and chucks him down that hole and he blows up in the reactor. And at the time I was like, well, he just murdered the guy. Was that good? That was good. Okay. All right. Well, that's debatable, but it's a galaxy far, far away. So, okay. And I just went with it. Right. And then we're going to get these prequels later on. And I'm like, okay, cool. And they're talking, the run up to the whole, the prequels. There was a lot of talk about how this was really going to be an arc of redemption for Darth Vader. And I was like, awesome, let's do this. Let's figure out how this guy is redeemed in Return of the Jedi. I hope that will make more sense. And then it wound up not making any more sense. What happened is that we learn in, is it Attack of the Clones where he goes and kills all the Sand People because of his mom?
It is. I killed them all.
Somebody who he loves is threatened, so he kills them all. Then in, the Return of the Sith, he goes and kills all the younglings and numerous others because somebody he loves, Padme, is threatened. Okay? Now in Return of the Jedi, what does he do? He kills the Emperor because somebody he loves is threatened. Now, the fact that the last act of him killing somebody because somebody he's loved is threatened is the same thing as what made him bad. Well, yeah. What happened there, guys? How is that? These are equivalent things? His behavior is consistent. And then so to call his last act of murder somehow a redemption for all the other murders that he did, it makes no sense. And just to have them say in the script, "Oh, you already saved me," and then they like retconned his little Force ghost, smiling above the Ewoks, right?
Yeah.
So that just made no sense to me at all, and it just in terms of the the dynamics of his actions versus the speech.
Well, yeah, not to mention he did murder. Ask Alderaan how.
Yeah,
dude. I was gonna ask, like, what do you call that? It's more than genocide. Is it terracide? Terracide, planicide. He committed so many crimes. I would argue that at that point somebody is beyond redemption, and I think even the creators agreed with that because he dies right after. He doesn't get to like have fun and have a little montage like a 90s sitcom, like, "Hey, this is me and my kids. We're reunited again." He didn't get that. He had to die instantly after he did his so-called redemptive act. And I would also argue that the creators of the new movies, I'm not asking you to weigh in on that, Kevin, in a way that will mess you up professionally. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm saying for my dollar, the creators of those movies didn't understand or respect the redemption arc, whether they bought into the dogma that it's a really redemptive act, or if they feel like you, that it wasn't really. Either way, they erased any import that it actually had because it didn't end anything. The rebels are still the rebels 25 years later. It's still all messed up. They're still planet killing things. Nothing happened. Nothing changed.
Yeah, including the threat. Like you're so right, because we start out with a planet-killing space station, and then how do they go escalate from there? Well, we can't have a smaller threat. Let's have another station. And then they had, in some of the books, they had planet-killing weapons. It's just always. And then the new trilogy, here's another planet-killing weapon. So
multi-planet killing weapon, guys. Could kill like 7 planets.
And extinguishing a star.
I have to make this observation, though, because I think that some of this may just be shortcomings in the filmmaking, or even not even shortcomings, but just something inherent to filmmaking. We've talked before on this show about how in a movie, when you kill 1 million people, it means nothing. But when you kill one person, it means everything. Because film is such an intimate medium, the psychological distance between like, I'm going to hit a button and murder a city becomes not really that bad of an act as when you watch somebody with a knife at somebody's throat and slit it. You know what I mean? It's partly the intimacy of how it's presented on film, where I think the shortcomings become a part of it is that you can make up for the lack of intimacy in sort of the button push of genocide by actually having characters react to the horror and actually having that horror impact on their lives and the actions that they take in a horrific way. And that's something that I would say Star Wars has always actively avoided in the movies, right? Like these horrible acts of war happen and it remains sort of like this fun, jolly romp. And I think that where that becomes difficult with Darth Vader is if you do stop to think about it for 5 seconds, you're like, wait a minute. This dude killed 5 billion people. But the fact that nobody in the movie stops to go, this guy killed 5 billion people is really important. It's important to the viewing experience because it does lull you into thinking, well, yeah, throwing the emperor down that hole, that makes up for all the bad stuff he did, you know, because of the way people react.
The emperor was clearly controlling him the whole time. He wasn't making his own decisions, whatever.
By the way, Ron, like a valid point that the movie never tried to make. This is, again, it's a problem in like, what are they doing or not doing on the screen? And I think that too often, the fan base is willing to give a pass because you can create it in your headcanon. But I would say that's a failure in fundamental storytelling. Like that's a failure to sell what you're trying to sell me. I don't know. That's my take.
But before you weigh in, Kevin, please, I want to weigh in on that point. I agree with you very much, Bill. We are very much simpatico on that. And that is one of the reasons why it is so precious. It's almost like that thing that it's a Lego. It's so funny that Star Wars is so often Lego sets because even with the narrative, you build it yourself. Everybody built up Boba Fett into something. My girlfriend, if Boba Fett jetpacked in through our window, my girlfriend would fuck Boba Fett. And he ain't did shit ever. You know what I mean?
You don't even know what he looks like.
We build these castles in our heads, and then we get defensive when somebody wants to take so-called modern film theory to it because we've done so much shoring up in our own heads and our own head canons. But how do you feel about that, Kevin? I'm sorry.
Well, no worries. Going back to something Bill was saying, I think, when we get to this last scene and he dies and he doesn't, there's no actual, there's no guilt for anything he's done. For all of those murders, the one that really gets me is like, hey, can we talk about the Jedi Temple for just a second? Can we go back to that? Now, granted that when Return of the Jedi came out, we didn't know about any of that past, right? So that would have been a silly thing to put in at that time. But still, there's no guilt for any of his crimes because he'd been doing murders throughout the original trilogy too. So, okay, and Luke knew about those, but there's this whole thing about him saying, well, there's still good in him. Okay, sure. There's still good in everybody. And he says that he was saved. But I would remind you that narcissists are really good at lying. And Darth Vader or Anakin Skywalker was really kind of a narcissist. The only thing that matters is what he wants. And he will kill if he doesn't get what he wants. So I thought that there should, if they wanted to show that he had really changed and that he had some sort of character growth, then he wouldn't just continue to murder and then say, oh, well, that last one was a good one and die happy, he should have had some actual real remorse. Maybe started an orphanage or something.
As he's
actually good.
As he's dying, he's like, Luke, please start an orphanage in my name. Call it the Darth Vader Orphanage for Troubled Teens.
But also though, okay, well, how about this? Do you feel, or are you moved by Marvel Comics attempts to kind of give him more agency throughout his process in the original trilogy? Because in the comics, they're kind of almost suggesting that he kind of knows that he has kids out there somewhere or something, and he's kind of trying to like slow play the Emperor. And I find that to be revisionist at best. I'm not trying to diss it, but it does seem like what we do with Star Wars. We go back and we shore up the parts that weren't quite built.
Yeah, that's what a lot of that stuff is. Anything that's happening in the classic era is a lot of trying to fit it in with everything that happened, before, and then everything that happens after. And it's a really delicate tightrope to walk, for sure. So I admit I haven't read those comics, so I can't comment on it, but I'm sure that it's probably really brilliantly done as best as it could be, because the same story group is behind all of it, and they're looking at the comics as canon stories now, just as they're looking at everything else as canon. So.
But also, you get to see his internal. The one thing we're lacking in the movies, by definition of the form, is that internal monologue that can justify a lot, that could be used to humanize a lot. And that is one great thing. People talk about the things that comics trying to be like movies, but there are so many things that comics can do that movies simply can't. And I think they're leaning on that to great effect.
I think there's an important distinction to draw, though, between like, what was he really thinking when he was doing these horrible things? And then what is a redemptive act at the end? And I think, Kevin, you seized on something when you said, starting an orphanage may be an off the top of your head example, but it's like, if Darth Vader is space Hitler or space Himmler or space Goebbels, or however you want to, equate the Nazis to the Empire, what would a actual redemptive act look like? And I feel like the way it was written was like, well, if Goebbels suddenly decided to kill Hitler, then that would make up for all the other stuff he did. And I think what we're trying to say is like, no, that's not really the case.
Yeah, he'd have to basically become some kind of time master and be able to go back and stop all the killing. Like, I don't know what other thing you could do in those situations and then like go back to his old self and be like, you were wrong the whole time. Be better. Kill this guy now.
Well, that thing that Bill was saying earlier about the fact that like we have a PG movie happening right here with the pretty people and the levitating rocks, and if you just pan that away, it's Saving Private Ryan, and you're just like this, and they have to keep the camera over here, or else all of this starts to muddle, some of this. Why is Holdo playing psychological games with our own soldiers when we're being decimated this way? The chamber drama of that doesn't seem to make as much sense if you really realize the horror. But I will give the new movies they do kind of show that war is hell in some of those scenes and some of those movies, man. It does look pretty bad.
Hey, and this is not to say that Star Wars isn't a fun romp, because it is absolutely a fun romp. But that doesn't mean you can't look at the things that you love and say, okay, well, where are their holes? And I think Darth Vader is a huge hole. He's a character who could have been so much more, and actually had a redemption. I mean, obviously they would have had to know that they were going to do all the other ones, but like, it's even with the 3 movies, you go, well, no, dude, you didn't make up for any of this. You would need to live and then like really shut down the Empire and really stop killing and talk about how you were wrong, so that future people who thought like you do don't think like you do. There's only a few ways you could pull being, a person who is a part of a genocide and who has literally killed children with his own hands. I don't know.
Well, at least when he did it, he had the high ground. That's all I'm saying.
Kevin, I want to ask, as someone who's written a lot of books and has handled a lot of characters, do you see sort of an inherent difficulty in writing a villain that almost becomes a show stealer? That idea that Darth Vader became so beloved as a character over the course of those original 3 movies, by the end of the last movie, it's like you almost want to give the fans something as opposed to creating like a consistent arc. Like what is that? What if you put yourself in those shoes, do you see the difficulty there?
So yeah, that would be if you had a very popular villain like that. I try not to make popular villains. I try to make them actual villains, and that they are, if they're going to get better, then there should be some serious punishment, some guilt, some redemption that is actual redemption, and not just killing your way out of your character flaws. So I think that it's always a difficulty when you're creating villains to, what is their genuine motivation and why do they think they're in the right? Because the cartoon villain is, I just want power. Yeah. And that's sort of what the Sith kind of are. I just want to be powerful. And,
I was not to interrupt you, but I think that very much applies to Darth Vader. Like those are the original 3 movies really do absolutely no work into giving him a motivation other than you just generally understand that he's a guy who likes to be in control. But even that, you don't know why.
Yeah. The cartoon does that a little bit because you start to see that he's caring for all the clone soldiers and he's seeing them killed all the time. And it comes to a point where he starts going, I just want this to end. I just want some kind of power enough to control this scenario. But then once he gets power and he goes to the dark side, he actually realizes that no, death is constant. That's just what it is. And you have to in order to end death, you have to kill more so that people are scared, is what he ends up thinking. He goes off that deep end. But with the Clone Series cartoon, you get to see it go slower and actually make a little bit of sense, rather than going from a guy who pod races to a guy who kills sand people to a guy who kills his own students, basically. Like those jumps made no sense in those movies.
It's like a checkers, that triple jump. He was just like boom, 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 all over the board.
Well, it also goes to what Kevin was saying earlier, that like his motivation for doing those things doesn't seem to be born out of any overriding philosophy. It's really just reactionary. It's really just like, oh, I'm feeling this way. Murder will solve it. And you still never get into like, what does this guy actually believe about the world? And frankly, I mean, then that gets into, well, if there isn't anything above and beyond, I feel bad. Murder helps. Then is that even a redeemable character? Like, is the whole exercise of trying to redeem that character ill-advised?
Well, it's interesting that you said that, if you don't mind me saying something here. Have you seen Mindhunter?
I haven't yet. I know I want to. Yeah, I want to see that.
One of the things they talked about in that, they go to talk to a psychologist after this guy is talking to this crazy serial killer guy, Ed Kemper, I think it is. Ed, yeah. And she's like, it's really interesting because these guys, these serial killers, do the same things that uber rich people do. She's like, these super celebrities, these super like business people are the same as serial killers. But what you said was murder is going to solve it. But what for them is going to solve it is money. So it's almost the same thing. And that's bananas to think about, that you basically have people who are murdering you with money.
Well, to go back to something that Bill was saying about some indication of his philosophy, I think there was one. It might have been Attack the Clones too. He's sitting in a field with Padme, and he's talking about governing, and she's talking about issues with the Senate, and he kind of casually says, well, I think one person should just go ahead and make all those decisions. And she kind of, raises her eyebrows at him. She's like, well, that's not a democracy. And he's like, okay. And right. So, I mean, he has these tendencies that he's kind of telegraphing. And also he pretty well telegraphed that he's a murderer because he told Padme, I killed them all. All right. So, and why didn't she ever run? Like, why did
that's a whole other issue. Yeah.
Right? So that's one of the big gaps there in my understanding of characters. I do not know why somebody would say, oh, that, excuse all of that. And then the other thing is that can you guys answer this? Maybe I never figured it out. This like genuine thing. All right. We see Yoda and Luke and all the Jedi, the training sequences and stuff. They're making stuff float all the time. And in, the last movie we had Luke sitting there levitating, right? Okay. So we've got people levitating stuff, big stuff too, huge things, right? Why couldn't Emperor just levitate his ass out of that? Why did he fall? Why did he says, I'm incredibly powerful? Why don't I just say, haha, I'm not going to fall today and float right back up there? For that matter, why didn't Darth Vader just punch him unconscious? And so why did he? I'm going to pick him up while he's still on lightning, and let him, electrocute me for a few minutes while I. There's a lot of things about the sequence that I've always found puzzling, because we'd watched even as a kid, right? You watch Empire Strikes Back and you see that levitation sequence and everything. Yoda just, hey, I'm going to lift up an X-wing fighter. So it should be easy for Jedi to. Is there a reason why? This has to be. Somebody's got an answer to this.
I grew up on Marvel Comics, and they used to make mistakes in the comics, and then they would say, if somebody pointed out the mistake, they'd say, "Oh, well, you get a no prize. You get a no prize because you would explain why the mistake wasn't a mistake." So this is my attempt to get this no prize. Okay. They have shown in canon after that movie that when Palpatine gets to shooting lightning, it's kind of like peeing. You just can't stop in the middle, and he just can't stop. Once he pops, he can't stop. So he's just shooting that lightning. And when Homeboy grabbed him, he's like, damn, I can't turn this lightning off to use my levitation powers. And he just threw him down the hole.
Amazing.
Does he shoot lightning out of his dick? That's the question.
Does he ever get shy with it too? Like, oh, you're watching me. I can't lightning. Look at me.
Don't make eye contact.
Oh. Well, we have to. There's obviously a lot of holes in this thing, and one of the things that I would like us to do is just try to drill down on what really would make it better. And I don't think we have to rewrite, we're definitely not going to rewrite the trilogy, but I think just as a starting point for this conversation, you kind of have to make a decision. Are you really trying to redeem this guy, or are you just trying to move him off the chessboard? If you're just trying to get rid of him, that's one thing. But if you're trying to do something that's actually redemptive, I think that's another thing. So Kevin, what for you would feel the best in terms of moving this towards something that feels a little bit more consistent?
I think that when they were writing the original trilogy, they were not aware at the time that they would have to really. They didn't know that they were going to get to make the last ones, right? So they basically had to have this big confrontation between the Emperor and Luke and, Darth Vader. And they did their thing at the time and then realized, well, now we have to make this a redemptive arc somehow. And we have to kind of fill it all in. And I think that where they started from, which was we've got this confrontation where Darth Vader is supposedly saved by killing the Emperor because he was saving Luke. They had to figure out how to make that work. And because they started with that particular ending, it might have handicapped what they were able to do, later on down the road. I'm not sure how to fix that because, if you start at the beginning of the whole thing, and then realize where you've got to actually redeem him, they probably would have, come up with something different, right? But they unfortunately sort of started with the end of the redemptive arc that wasn't really redemptive when they went back and tried to make it that way.
Well, it is a hard thing to recontextualize all that stuff. And one of the things, we do a show called Reboot It on YouTube, where we basically take an hour and hubristically attempt to reboot franchises. And we did Star Wars. And one of the main things that we changed was Palpatine got his role cut, like the producer's girlfriend. You know what I mean? Just like he just cut all the way down, because we felt as though he dominates the story too much. When you really think about it, it's him versus it's Skywalkers, and everybody else are just chess piece proxies. If you really think about the overall narrative, and we didn't like that. I personally didn't like that. Me and one of our buddies, Billy Business, we almost came to fisticuffs because he was like trying to jam Sheev up our butts, and I was like, Darth Vader's the most powerful, cool, charismatic thing in this whole damn universe, and he's a slave from the moment he's born until the minute he dies. You know what I mean? And that's disgusting on some level, right. So we had to change that, and we kind of made it be like the Force was an actual dead religion. Not 15 years ago, dudes were floating rocks, like you said, all over the place. No. Yeah. 1,000 years ago, somebody told a bunch of convincing stories about dudes who could levitate stuff. And then when Darth Vader, Anakin comes along, Palpatine would be like an Elijah Muhammad type, who was getting over on this religion, ancient religion. And then he sees a guy who can really do the shit. Like if one of these bullshit preachers met the new Moses or the reincarnation of Jesus, be like, I got to monetize this. But Darth Vader figures out pretty damn quick that that's what's happening and overtakes the cult. And now he's the cult of personality around which the entire empire is built. But even then, we're not really redeeming them, because to Bill's point, we kind of made him like this big bad who had to get taken out by the end of it. Leia and Han and Luke and everybody had to find each other because they were spread out, much like the regular trilogy. They had to find each other and coalesce to defeat Hitler, who can destroy a planet with his mind. But we didn't have a redemption arc in that fucker. We threw it away because it was hard.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead. I mean, I think a redemption, if you were going to do it in the original trilogy, the only way you could do it is if he showed some kind of doubt, like during the Death Star, if he made up an excuse, like, I'm not sure it's a good idea. Don't you think that will bring people to their side? If we kill a whole planet of people, don't you think that'll bring people to his side? Even though he'd have to argue for people's lives in some way, and then give into it for whatever reason, and then, to try to have a redemption. But if he doesn't show any remorse the entire time, he just stands there breathing hard, you can't exactly have a redemption story, right?
Yeah. I mean, even if he had said, there's a lot of stuff in there. When he starts breathing hard at the first time, and he uses that first breath to go, no, but that if you look at that as the beginning of his pain or redemption, that could have been significant, that he is spending his entire life in pain and on the point of death, you know what I mean? And he's only kept alive, by pseudoscience. Mm-hmm. So, but that didn't get explored either, really. That he was in pain. It was more like, look at what a badass I am instead. So, and I want to stress at this point, though, that this is all out of love, right? We would not be discussing any of this way if we didn't love the heck out of everything. So it's just, you got to examine the stuff you love, right? And look at it. So this is that's why we're kind of saying is maybe a bit of a missed opportunity. And I think it would have been different I guarantee it would have been different if they started out with the Phantom Menace as the starting point and went from there to try to make a redemptive arc. But because they had to go backwards, it made it very difficult. It's sort of like that same issue with what was that movie that they made as the prequel of Aliens?
Prometheus. Prometheus, yeah.
Right? Like scientists not behaving in a scientific manner. Oh yeah, we'll just break quarantine and bring in an alien life form. That's fine.
Right. And you only do it because it has to happen for the original movie to happen. Yeah,
exactly. So that, yeah, they were really constrained by the original trilogy, and then having to kind of make things work. I think, it's just a really tough rope to walk.
Yeah, but just in defense, though, of the way George Lucas decided to do it, I do declare, I think that if it was created with that sort of meticulous storycraft, we might not be sitting here talking about it, because it was built like a myth. And the myth, how the fuck does Heracles get to the Aegean stables? We turn the page. That's how we got there. Shut up and look at him clean the stables. You know what I mean? And just watch the adventure. And I love the fact that it's set up that way. Like we get, as Kevin alluded to earlier, Luke is, power converters. Turn the page. I'm lifting stuff and defeating Wampus. Turn the page. I got a black suit on. I'm doing diving board flips over Sarlacc pits, It's the nature of the beast. And it's kind of why we're having this conversation.
Well, and in film, it's also the technology that you have to work with. I mean, you got to get all the great fight scenes because they finally learned how to make great fight scenes. It's one of those things where you're like, well, yeah, we wanted Jedis to be flying all over the place and flipping all over and jumping 30 feet, but we couldn't do that at the time, and make it look cool. Yeah. So.
And last things last, none of which has anything to do with whether or not you actually give your villain a proper motivation in your story, which I think is what we're saying is sort of like the crux of the missed opportunity here, is that you have a villain with all the coolest trappings and the coolest voice and presence and does inscrutable, mysterious things. But because you never give your audience any indication of why he does what he does or what he's thinking, the effort to redeem him is kind of wasted. And then when you double down and you try to tell his backstory, and again, it doesn't really get into anything more than just, I have feelings, so I murder people. Mm-hmm. It's, you got to give your villain a reason, you got to give your villain something to justify themselves in order for any of this stuff to, I think, work. So, yeah.
Yeah, but Kevin, I want you to weigh in on this as we start to wrap up. Do you think that you could even give him the amount of all the stuff that we're talking about we want, right? Mm-hmm. As an employee, it was the main crux of what I was thinking about the character for all time, is in order for him to be the type of villain we want, he would have to be the one on the throne, or at least be making his own decisions as like a Shigur. It's funny that he's like a proto Shigur from No Country for Old Men. He's this dude who, when you see him, it's on. You have fucked up, my friend. You have messed up very badly. And that's why you're seeing him. But at the same time, he's somebody's toady. He's Jaws from James Bond. He's Oddjob. He's Oddjob in a samurai helmet. How can he have enough agency if he's not making the plans? If he's somebody's toady, I don't get how we would ever feel all this stuff. Do you agree with that or no?
It might be are you guys familiar with the movie Grosse Point Blank?
Yes. So familiar.
If Darth Vader had been that kind of bad guy, where he was trained to it, led to it, found out he had a taste for it, etc., and then he had the ability to get himself out of it and actually stop being a bad guy and try to be a good guy from now on, to stop being evil. If he was given the freedom to make that decision, then I think that could have been a lot more rewarding. And it's one of the things that I kind of like about Grosse Point Blank is here's a guy who's understanding that, he's tortured by what he's done as an assassin. And he doesn't want to be that anymore. And then he realizes he doesn't have to be. So when he makes that decision, it's a gradual thing, and love is involved, and so on and so forth. But I like that as an actual redemption arc, and it seems hopeful to me. But Darth Vader is never given those choices, right? This point that you were making, he's enslaved from a very young age to, his death. So, if he had the ability, the agency to do that stuff, and to be more of a sort of a hitman or an assassin, rather than I am the toady to the emperor, that might have been a story.
I think we just made Wick Vader or
Darth Wick.
Darth Wick. That's much better. That's much better. See, I throw him out there, you knock him down, Bill. Good one. Yeah, I think we just made. Yeah,
that's actually brilliant. I think I would love that, because it's basically the emperor when he has a group of people he's having a trouble with. He calls up Darth Vader and is like, "Hey, I need you to go take care of these guys. Are you busy?" And Darth Vader's like, "No, I'm not busy." Okay, cool. And then he goes and does it, but he starts to realize this is not helping anyone. Nobody's lives are made better by what I'm doing. I got into this because I thought I was going to help people, but that's not what's happening.
Yeah, but I just want to get to the part where he's got the reason why he never has a lot of chance. Beautiful point, Kevin, about Grosse Point Blank in regards to love being part of it, because they kill Darth Vader's love, right? They kill his love, and then they tell him that his other loves are gone as well. So he has no love, and he replaces it with hate and all that cliche stuff. But the bottom line is, he doesn't have a chance to have a relationship with somebody or change for anybody because she's already deceased. And in Grosse Point Blank, they allowed him to try to become a better person in order to earn Mini Driver's big face love, So I get that, and I love that. And in this, I just want to get to the point where, maybe Padme's taken away after we've seen her with him more, and he's, I don't know, maybe levitating up the concrete to get the gold coins to go back into the assassin life. I want to get to that part in the movie, because that I think that would give us some feelings of like, it just Darth Vader never had a puppy, guys. Darth Vader never had a puppy.
Give him a monkey lizard, man. Darth Wick and his monkey lizard going out for adventures, paying for everything with Kruger Rands or wherever those gold coins are.
Exactly. So, yeah, well, this is the point in the show where we thank you very much for coming on and being such a stellar guest. And with somebody as prolific as you, we want to have a nice fat section for you to plug the things that you're doing right now, because it is myriad. I have checked it. So run it down for us, Kevin.
Well, thank you so kindly. I really appreciate you guys having me on. It's been a lot of fun talking with you about this stuff. I've had a blast. So, so things that I've written, as Ed was saying, I've written quite a bit. I have a 9-book series called the Iron Druid Chronicles, featuring the last Druid on Earth, who eventually there are more, but he's been around for 2,000 years or more. And he stole a sword from ancient Irish gods, and now he's been hiding out because they want to kill him and they want to get it back. So when he decides to stop running and fight, that's when things really start to snowball and become interesting. So that's a complete series. If you would like to dive in there, you can read from beginning to the end and binge that sucker. Then I have Ink and Sigil, which is my brand new stuff. It just came out last month. Well, I guess 2 months now. It came out in August, and it is set in the Iron Druid universe. But you do not have to read Iron Druid to enjoy this. So if you would like to start with my brand new stuff, you can do that. And then if you want to pick up Iron Druid later, great. But that one is set in Glasgow, and it's a lot of fun. It follows a guy named Al McVarish, who uses magical inks and sigils to work a little bit of magic in the world, and he is supposed to keep us safe from rogue elements of various pantheons. He kind of writes and enforces magical contracts. So those are my 2 urban fantasy series. There's going to be more in the Ink and Sigil world coming. And then I have an epic fantasy series. It's just a trilogy. The first 2 books are out. It's called The Plague of Giants and A Blight of Black Wings. And I'm now engaged in writing the last book, which is called A Curse of Krakens. And I just got done making the map, or most of it. I've got to do some small detail work, but yeah, I've I do my own maps, and I'm having a blast with that. And then I got about a year ahead of me to get that sucker done. So, and then last thing that I've written is, besides the Star Wars book, Heir of the Jedi, is a series of humorous fantasies, 3 of them called The Tales of Pell, and I co-wrote with Delilah S. Dawson. And it kind of takes pokes some loving fun at fantasy tropes. And the first one is called Kill the Farm Boy. So if you guys want to check those out for a good laugh, is sort of Terry Pratchett-esque, give it a shot. And anything you try of mine, I really appreciate you giving me a try.
Yeah, and let me just jump on here and say I have read all of the Iron Druid series, and it's great. Also, would like to mention your novellas of the purloined poodle. Yes. Written from the point of the dog of point from Oberon. It's great. And also, I can't wait to read. What was her name again?
I'm sorry, who?
The lady you wrote with the other books.
Yeah, Delilah S. Dawson.
Delilah, yes. I can't wait to read those. I'm super excited. I'm telling you guys, go buy all of this guy's books. I'm not even lying. Just buy them all and then spend all of your time in a bath reading them. Do that.
Much. I'll buy a taco with that and pay some tuition bills or something. That'd be great.
Guys, I did not care for the opinions expressed in this episode. I did not care for it at all. I think you're off base and your criticism is unwarranted. You obviously just haven't thought about it closely enough.
Oh, thanks, George Lucas, for coming on our show.
George Lucas swinging by just to drop his 2 cents on what we just did.
Dude, and he was riding a tauntaun. I think that's cruel because it's like 100 degrees outside. He's putting that poor creature through so much strife and stop motion pain.
No matter what, I will be in a flannel shirt and jeans with my dad sneakers. So, it doesn't matter.
So if you see him on a tauntaun headed to Burbank to get on a plane to go back to Skywalker Ranch.
You guys, that episode was pretty exciting for me. As you already know, you heard in the beginning, you heard during the episode. This was fun.
Dude, we're proud of you for not fanning out. You were remarkably objective. You didn't ask, what kind of chili do you eat before you write your stories? It didn't get too inside. Navy beans, and I enjoyed talking to somebody who, our partner Billy Business has accused me of being a Star Wars hater since I was a zygote. Basically, our whole relationship has been that, and I just got to say, you got to love it to find all the crannies in it, all the nooks and crannies. You got to love it to really see those. They're like handholds on a mountain. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, or fortunately, Star Wars has so many handholds. It's like a bunny slope all the way to the top. I'm sorry, and the fact that some people don't see that or choose to not see that, I don't see how that helps you enjoy it more. I enjoy Star Wars even though I have all these feelings, and Kevin seemed to be very much the same way.
I mean, isn't that how we're supposed to look at art in general? Is like we can be critical and still enjoy anything we do. I mean, I like Con Air. It's not a good movie, but there's a part in it where he does a great roundhouse and a bullet hits him and he doesn't even react, and I like that. Why do I like it? I can't explain it to you, but it's fun. What I'm saying.
Ephemeral and mystical. I mean, there's no explanation whatsoever.
Yeah, just so we're clear, I am not comparing Con Air to Star Wars. I just want to be clear.
Just to be clear, I've had so much more fun watching Con Air than Star Wars.
Knew it was coming. Couldn't resist.
You couldn't stop. You couldn't resist it. You couldn't resist it, Ed. No one is. When you say you like Star Wars, after you say something like that, no one's gonna believe you.
He's gaslighting all of us. That's really what's happening here.
No, I mean, dude, look, I enjoy it, and I do like the fact that that Kevin and even our rebooted episode of Star Wars were able to show how much I love Star Wars. If you want to see how much I love Star Wars, watch our rebooted about Star Wars, and definitely listen to this podcast, because if you don't love it, you don't go into these details. If you don't love it, you don't get into screaming matches with some of your best friends about how Darth Vader has no agency. If you don't love it, you can't get to that level.
Hey, listen, and now you have the feather in your cap of a New York Times best-selling author sharing your opinion. So major thanks to Kevin for coming on to back up our boy Ed Greer.
So thank you, Ron. You did my bidding well.
Sith Greer.
I was going to try to do a Darth Vader voice, but then you were doing Darth Vader, and then I got confused. Am I supposed to do Palpatine?
Always, Ron. You know your Palpatine is the greatest.
I can't even do it right now. I haven't done it for so long.
Your favorite line used to be "You're weak."
Oh yeah, you're weak.
There it is.
Your weakness is your friends, like Ed Greer and Bill.
That's, they say that great voiceover artists, they just need that one phrase to get back into character. You did it.
Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah. And I would have given anything for Darth Vader to come on and be like, "George Lucas, you have failed me for the last time."
I am not the George you're looking for.
Excellent.
So where can they find you at, Ed?
You can check me out at Ed Greer Destroys on Twitter, getting savaged over my opinions for this episode. or you can check me out doing a drawing of Darth Vader getting smashed by something on Instagram at Ed Greer Destroys on that. And if you wanted to commission something funny like that, go to edgreerdraws@gmail.com. And thank you guys for your continued support on the Patreon and everything. This has been a really wild ride, and thank you for supporting the new show.
Bill, where can they find you?
You can find me at CBillDraw on Instagram. All of my illustration work is on there. If you want to buy something, I am at BC Studios BC Studios Art. I get confused. At BC Studios Art on Instagram, which will take you to the Etsy shop. You can buy the greatest toothbrush you will ever buy. Clean mouth, clean planet, dirt cheap, toothbrushme.com. And of course, you can subscribe and hit the bell and keep coming back for Reboot It, our flagship show in partnership with the Great Billy Business.
That's right. And I have one of those toothbrushes. In fact, Ariel also has one of those toothbrushes, and our teeth are now super clean, and we can save the planet at the same time. We're like Captain Planet.
Hey, but listen, it's a win-win-win, Ron. You get clean teeth, you get the lowest environmental impact of any toothbrush on the market, and it's the same price you'd pay at a grocery store. It's almost like you set me up to deliver this totally non-canned pitch.
Yeah, no, I mean, this was totally off the cuff. Like, I would never just set you up to be able to do something like that.
Dude, and on the bright side, our show's already sponsored.
Yeah.
Head of the game, baby.
But you know what? You're not sponsored by my YouTube channel, because only 20 people are on it. You guys, fix that. Come on my YouTube channel. Okay, I lied. There's 90 people. What I'm saying, guys, is that if you want to see some of the weirdest content, from Breakfast and a Book with Swallow, that's me, to rollerblading video I made from the 90s, to this terrible yet also fantastic video that I made called El Ninja, where me and my friends fight each other, and it's real dumb. Please go on my YouTube channel. You're also going to get Positive Spin, which is my new show with my girlfriend, Ariel, where we take movies that are terrible, but like find the good stuff in them. Like, oh, the lighting on this one was pretty awesome. That one line that was delivered was great. That chick was pretty cute. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch some of these movies and give you some good positive things to say. Like, craft services must have been hellacious on this one. Like, they look very well fed. The makeup artist is doing a great job on this. You know,
yeah.
Give it up for the caterers to come out in that rainstorm. Great job.
Yeah, you gotta reward the people who work hard for art.
Mm-hmm.
Huh? Like the
Lord
boom
knows
guy.
There's a lot of people working hard, even on really crappy movies. That's for sure.
And they deserve props. I mean, you guys, if you want to see one of the horror movies that I did where I played a serial killer, it's called Evil Ever After. and I'm in it, and it's terrible, and there was blood all over me a bunch of times. If you want to check it out,
I knew nothing about this, and now
you didn't know about that? Did we work hard on it? Yes, we did. Was it good? No, it was not.
No guarantees here in the art business. So, but just like but you are guaranteed to get a good show every time you come here. So thank you guys for listening to another great episode of
The Greatest Pod.
I don't know if it's really the greatest. I mean, it's just okay.